Welcome to the Living and Loving Your Life podcast, a podcast where you're going to learn how to stop overthinking and overdoing so that you can connect to the one thing that you shy away from, your emotions. I'll show you how to align your head and your heart so you can harness the power of emotions to take control of your life and create the impact you dream of. This is your coach, Chantel Allen. I am so excited to share a conversation that I had with a good friend of mine, Monica Packer. She is a coach, she is a podcaster, and she is someone that I have looked up to for so long. And we've run in the same circles in a lot of different summits and different programs that we've been a part of. And so it's so fun for me to catch up with her again. I was actually able to be a part of her podcast, I think it was 4.5 years ago, which is just crazy to me to think about. And it's just been fun to kind of watch each other grow. And I am so excited to share this conversation that we had around her progress model. I don't want to get too much into it because we're going to dive into it a lot more here, but her expertise in this subject is amazing. And it is something that I know every single one of you guys can benefit from. And so I encourage you guys to listen in, take notes, and at the very end, she gives you guys a special gift that I really hope you guys will go and take advantage of. Monica describes herself as a normal mom and a recovering perfectionist who basically uncovered the truest model to lasting growth, and it's progress made practical. As a podcaster and a coach, she guides women to find sustainable growth by adopting progress over perfection. Monica is a mom of 5, a former middle school teacher, and a forever Oprah fangirl. She's a sourdough obsessor and a beginning gardener. And you can find more about her at aboutprogress.com. So without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Monica. Welcome to the Living and Loving Your Life podcast, Monica. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, I just want to dive right into this topic. Everybody here on this podcast that's listening, they are very familiar with personal development. They are very familiar with getting and applying lots of tools. But you're going to give us some better tools here, I think, because I think so many people struggle with personal progress, feeling like they're doing the best that they can, but still stalling out in so many ways, or not making as much progress as they think they should be, knowing all that they have. So I'm curious, first off, just a little bit more about you, but has personal development always been something that you have been interested in?
Honestly, yes. And there's different things in my life that I totally stumbled across that I never thought I would get into. But personal development is just one of those core pieces of myself that I've had since I've been little. And when I say personal development, I just mean I've always wanted to learn and I've always wanted to strive to get and be better. And, taken too far, that definitely was not healthy for me. But overall, it's been such a core part of myself. Like I remember watching Oprah every day at 4 p.m. and taking notes. Like I was that kind of person, or reading self-help in elementary school. And, I think I had a life coach as one of my potential career ambitions when I even knew it was possible as an 8th grader, when you did those tests, which is funny because I totally forgot about that job for a very long time and it all came back around. So yes.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Like I didn't even know about life coaching probably till, 10 years ago, maybe. So the fact that you started at such a young age, that's amazing. So,
well, I didn't know what it was. I just thought, telling people what to do because you've learned something. That sounds great to me.
That's awesome. So let's dive into this part with plateaus. Let's start there because I think so many people, again, like we were kind of saying, they have desires, they have goals, they have ambitions for who they want to be, goals in their business, motherhood, and yet they seem to hit these plateaus. And I'm curious, what would you say, what would be your description of what a plateau is?
A plateau to me is when you feel like you are putting in the work, but are not seeing any progress, any visible progress. And sometimes if you're doing deep work stuff, that can be a little bit more complicated because maybe you're trying to work on self-talk and you are putting in the work. You're trying to stop the thoughts. You're trying to speak back to them. You're trying to reinsert a new mantra or way of thinking. And no matter how much you try, those thoughts just keep coming up on tape, or they're getting worse, or they're running away from you. And that's just an example there. So any way that you feel like you're putting in the work, but you're not seeing the progress. Sometimes it can also be the same amount of work you put in before is
Mm,
not having the same results like
mm,
you had in the past. And so it feels like you're a little more frustrating in different ways because you're like, I'm doing the work that used to have this outcome, and yet I am not there. Maybe that's with sleep. Let's say you're always still going to bed around the same time and making sure you're having a good nighttime routine, but you're waking up more tired, or you're finding it really hard to wake up early,
mhm.
even though you technically are putting in the work to be able to wake up earlier. So there's just a couple examples there.
So I'm curious I mean, there's no real definitive reason as to why, but what is your guess as to why we hit these plateaus when it comes to our personal progress?
I think it's just human nature. I
Mm,
also think it's what the process is of development that we don't often learn about. So, if people are really into personal development, like me, like you, we are really good at listening to when someone tells us how to do something.
yes.
I have a great business coach. I love her, and she loves me
Hmm.
because I just say how, and
Yeah.
she tells me how, and I do it.
Yeah.
Because she has
Totally.
a lot of clients that just don't, maybe they just like to listen, and I'm a tell me what to do and I'll do it. But that's not how life often works. And actually, it's not how business even works too.
Hmm.
It's we are so good at finding out the how and
Yeah.
doing the how, but what we miss is that what we are being taught skips over plateaus most of the time, or they make it about you, or they skip over your own circumstances that we often have as women in unique ways that most of the personal development people out there maybe don't. Maybe they have more money, maybe they have more time, maybe they have more support, maybe they don't have children in the home, or there's so many other factors that they might be skipping over too, and they just kind of gloss over. The fact is that we are plateaus are part of progress, and they're not just part of it, they're an essential part. And when we hit those plateaus, we can go down the self blame track of just being like, well, I mustn't be trying hard enough, or I must be following the wrong plan, or that person
Yes.
was wrong. And we blame ourselves, and we either quit or burn out, or we try to find another method that is
Hmm.
still skipping over the whole plateau thing
Yeah.
that we get in the same cycle. Instead, we have to know that plateaus are part of progress, and that being on them doesn't mean we aren't progressing. It actually means that the work is being done underneath the surface. And we can talk more about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I love that. And the way that I kind of talk about it is, life is kind of like the river of misery. And the river is
Mm,
moving, right? It's a
yeah.
moving thing. We actually want to be a part of the river of misery, but every once in a while, there's going to be a rock in that river of
Mm,
misery that we want to get out, and we need to rest, and we need to kind of recalibrate, and we need to kind of, refocus. Because I love what you're kind of saying here is like plateaus are normal, and they're essential to our growth, because we are not meant to be doers, right? All of the time. We
yeah.
need those plateaus to kind of recharge ourselves a little bit. And then we want to get back in, right? I'm like, we don't want to stay on
Yeah.
that rock. We want to get back into the river of misery, but it's so important for us to have those moments of plateau and not use it kind of like you were saying, like the shame and blame of on ourselves, and then, getting back into the rat race. So I love that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too, though, because plateaus, like you said, are opportunities. They're opportunities to pause. So when
Yes.
you hit a plateau, you pause and you do evaluate. Am I putting in the small steps that are going to create the big outcomes that I want? And if the answer is yes, then you can take a look at do I need to do those in the same way or to the same intensity? Do I need to do them differently? Do I need to rest? Do I need to pivot with my path altogether? Is my outcome even what I want anymore? It's a great opportunity to pause. And that's why the self blame needs to be completely removed, because when we just look at those plateaus as moments to be able to pause and recalibrate, oftentimes we'll find out we actually still want the same thing and we're doing the right thing. We just have to keep doing it. And other times is we need just to take a break and then keep going back to what we knew. Very rarely is a huge pivot. And those happen too.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying. So I'm curious then, what inspired you? You came up with what you call the progress model, correct?
Mhm.
What inspired you to create this? I mean, you see all these different elements, right? What inspired you to create this progress model? And I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
this is the accidental part of my journey. And it came because I was trying to follow prescriptions
Mm,
so well for so long
okay.
that did not work for me. In many ways, it led to crashing and burning as a young adult. And, I dealt with multiple eating disorders and mental illness as an overachieving perfectionist who was really good at following those models that we've been given about here's how you get good grades. Here's how you are a good teacher. Here's how you are a good spouse. Here's how you're a good mom. Here's how you're a good church member. Like I was good at following those things. And then when it came at the cost of my mental and physical and even spiritual health, I went down another path of just trying to stay safe in the nothing. Like I could still do well with my responsibilities, but my own development was put aside. And I found myself in the same position though, Chantel, of just feeling stuck.
Mm,
And there was a price I was paying in
yeah.
being an underachieving perfectionist too. So that's when I tried to have to figure out like, well, is there another way then? Because I am unwilling to pay the price that all requires of the all or nothing models I've been given my whole life.
Yes.
And I also have been paying the price of nothing.
Mm,
So is there an in between? Can I be mediocre and it be okay? Can
mm,
going the mediocre way to me, which was more like B or C plus effort, right? Or even just A minus
yeah.
to some people, to me was like C effort,
Yeah.
if I could put in that kind of effort, could I still grow? And I've been doing that experiment for 8 years. And I can honestly say the answer is not just yes, you can grow, but the answer is better, farther, more sustainably, and exponentially than
Mm.
when you're following the all or nothing models that we've been given our whole life. And that's where the progress model comes in.
Oh, I'm like super excited about this. So yes, tell us kind of the principles, the basics of this progress model and how we can get there faster, sustainably, and make sure that we're hitting those progress
Yeah.
points.
Yeah. First, let me just say I'm teaching about the progress model to your audience from the bird's eye view. So there's a lot to this. So I'm going to do my best to not fire hose. I'm just giving you that bird's eye view.
Okay.
So let's start with what the foundation to the progress model is that you need to know what progress really is and what it really looks like.
Yes.
That's outside of the all or nothing model we've been given. And
Yes.
the short way for me to describe that is progress follows the process. And the process is small wins build over time.
Mm.
You have to believe in the process and you have to practice the process for it to work. That's a big thing right there. So that means we're not doing the all, we're not doing the nothing. We are doing something and we are believing that in the bigger picture, that will help me build in ways that are sustainable. That mean over time, I can grow exponentially. I can't grow exponentially overnight. I'm not going to be an overnight success in anything because that will be built off a faulty foundation. And I'm
Yeah.
paying a price that I don't want to keep paying. So that's the first big step is knowing what progress really is and really looks like. And the half of it was the process, believing in and practicing the process. The other half of that is actually welcoming in the mess as well. In
Ooh.
other words, failure. So we talked about how plateaus are an important part of progress. Another way to say that is failure,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yep.
plateaus can feel like failing
Mm-hmm.
when you're not changing or growing or seeing the outcomes. Failure is essential to growing. You have to make space for things not going well, for still showing up in small ways where and how you can, instead of trying to only meet the all or the nothing, as well as believing that the failures aren't about you. They are, again, moments to pause and pivot as needed, including potentially resting.
I
So there's the
love
progress part.
No, I love that. And I'm curious when you say like, defining what progress really is, do you, with your clients, when you're kind of going through this process with them, do you help them really define what that progress, because I love what you're saying here.
Mm,
So many times we say like, well, I'm just going to make progress, but we really have never defined how do you know when you've hit that progress point? So I'm curious, like,
got it.
what does that process look like for you when you're trying to define progress for your clients using this model?
You are asking such a Monica question that I'm like laughing internally because this would totally be the thing I'd ask. And the answer is not going to satisfy the Monica in all of us because it's way more intuitive
Mm,
than can be prescribed.
Okay.
Progress is going to look different for each person. It's also going to look different for each person's season and time.
Yes.
What looks like progress for me right now was a whole lot different, looks a whole lot different than it did even a year ago when I was pregnant. And then a year ago before that. And actually, right now, I would say, like, I am not doing as much as I was doing a year ago when I was pregnant. And that's because it's intuitive. It's about knowing this is what I can sustainably do
Mm.
at this time of my life and still be working towards what I want. I will say one thing I want to make clear is people push back against perfectionism being bad because they think, well, there isn't there a good kind? And people have different opinions on this, but to me, there is no good form of perfectionism.
Mm. That's so good.
Perfectionism comes from a place of a loss of identity, misplacing it on your outcomes. There is a good thing, a such thing as progress, though, right? Of having a solid sense of self. That means you can listen to yourself as you're determining what is right for me in this season to still be making progress in the ways that matter to me.
Love that you say that because yes, we talk about perfectionism a lot on
I
this
bet.
because they're all high achievers. They're all ones that are
Yeah.
constantly striving. And I love what you're talking about here. It is based off of where you're at, your season, where you're currently striving for. But I also love to the discussion around really making sure you are making those definitive place markers because I know for
Yeah.
myself, I'm thinking back to even a couple of years ago when I was really on this, progress, right, of trying to become a better mom, better business person.
Yeah.
One of those things was like, stop yelling at my kids.
Mhm.
And we can
Mhm.
say, stop yelling at your kids, but how do you measure the progress on that? And so I think it still is, there's some nuance to this as well, where it's like, how
Yeah.
do you still measure, so that your brain can kind of shut off a little bit when it's trying to beat the crap out of you a little bit and say,
Yeah.
I am making progress because XYZ. This is what I've defined as progress for me in this moment. So, and it's not
Definitely.
perfectionism, but it's just
Yeah.
making sure we're defining those little moments for yourself so that you can look back and say like, no, I'm totally making progress because of this, what I've decided. So, I think that's a
And
good.
it's still having like casting a vision of what you want and what you're moving towards is
Yeah.
still vital to the
Yes.
progress model. It's not like we're just shipping, we're paddling in a boat that we don't know where it's going. We still know where we're headed. We
Yes.
just know it's going to involve a lot of curves and even
Yes.
some waterfalls along the way.
Well, and I also think it's great, even with your perfectionism, thinking about this too, is like making sure that our destination is not this perfectionistic view
That's
too,
so
right?
important.
Yeah. When
Yes,
you're talking about like the all or
that's
nothing, I
valuable.
think so many people like they can give them a little leniency on the journey of like, well, that's fine, I can fail, but they're still thinking perfectionism is the goal. I will never yell at my kids ever again is going to be
Yeah.
the ultimate goal. And I think that's beautiful too, is to kind of gauge and make sure that we're checking with that vision as well.
Yeah. The vision still needs to be based in reality.
I love that.
That's really important.
Yes, I think that's so good. Okay, what's the next part? What's the next part of your progress model?
So, after you really understand what progress is and what it looks like, there's three pieces that you need to be pushing yourself in with that progress in mind. And they all have to do with self. And excuse me, my voice is a little scratchy because I had a week of being sick, but I'm not now. So I'm like sounding both deep and scratchy. But anyway, so these three categories are the really more pillars of self and their identity, which to me I define as knowing self, like knowing
Mm,
yourself.
yep.
The next pillar is habits, and that's where you support that self
Hmm.
via habits, like the way you live your life. And the third pillar is fulfillment, and that is feeling like yourself. And that can happen through self care, which also has to do with habits. It could also happen just with hobbies and having interests and working on your own internal development, and feeling fulfilled in your life. I think we all know what fulfillment feels like. To me, it's feeling like yourself. So those three pillars again were identity, habits, and fulfillment. And as you're working through those, the first really matters the most is identity. You have to really come to a clear place of knowing who you are and what matters to you. That's identity. That means you know what your values are, what matters to you in the big picture, what you're working towards. You also know little things like your likes and dislikes, your preferences, the things that you are into, what makes you have a spark inside and come alive. That's identity. And that acts as the compass as you're steering that ship. And you're trying to decide next how to support yourself, like what habits would support that self. Because when you know who you are, then you're able to far better wade through the shoulds that come up with
Mm.
habits, especially like exercise. There's so many shoulds. I mean,
Yeah.
we could all just list them off, right? I'm supposed to only exercise in these type of ways. These are the ways that count as exercise, but I'm not that person. I'm actually someone who values peace and serenity. So maybe my kind of exercise is actually just going for a pretty slow walk
Yeah.
most
Love
days of the
that.
week. And that fills myself and also supports myself too. So identity matters most. It steers the ship. And then fulfillment is what makes life rich and meaningful and beautiful. And it helps you with all those rocks you talked about, that come up, that helps you rise above
Mm.
what is going on. It helps you feel like yourself. And I'll just say, I went backwards on those last two for a reason, but with fulfillment, let me say, I think it saved 2020 through 2022 for me.
Mm. Okay.
Um, we went through so much, as I'm sure everyone who is listening did too.
Mm.
Quick picture of us. We moved in April of 2020. We decided to sell our house by ourselves in the middle of the pandemic in California, where you were not allowed to even have people come in your home if you had a realtor or listed it on the MLS. So we sold it ourselves
Mm.
so people could come in and tour while we were outside of the house. We sold it magically and let's say miraculously. Okay. And then in June, we moved to my parents' home in Utah, not knowing where we were going from there.
Mm.
And from there, every part of our lives just fell apart. We lived in my parents' basement for a year and a half. We were lucky enough to get a house, but it was a complete massive reno job. It was sold as a tear down. And in the middle of this, my four kids had really difficult times, as I'm sure everyone knows, with autism. And she was dealing with the fallout of extreme bullying that she had experienced right before the pandemic began. And it was really difficult. She had a couple of nervous breakdowns that also entailed her needing to be hospitalized a few times. I had another son have a couple mental breakdowns too. Just terrible, hard things I don't really talk about too much because we were in the middle of it. But because of all, and we were homeschooling, did I mention that? Uh, and on top of all of that, like I have to tell you, it was so difficult. It required every part of me, every minute of every day required every part of me for about 2 years. And I can tell you that I was myself through it all. I
Yeah.
didn't handle it all well perfectly. I made mistakes. I yelled a little here and there. I wish I could do some things differently, but overall, I look at that span of 2 years and I can say I was there. I
Yeah.
was present. And it's because I knew who I was and I had that sense of self with me. And the third part of it was also there, habits. And that's where I felt supported internally to be that self. I hit a big plateau with my personal development when I was ignoring habits. It
Mm.
wasn't one of the pillars I thought that mattered. I just was focusing on identity and fulfillment for years, even on the podcast,
Mhm.
until I realized I was on my own plateau. And it was because my day to day reality was not matching who I was, what I knew I wanted, what I knew I needed. And I wasn't feeling like myself because I wasn't getting enough sleep or I wasn't having the alone time I needed to feel like myself. I was running ragged. So that the habit piece, I hate to say it because I did not want to be a habit person.
Yeah.
Did not set out to do that. That is a third pillar for a very important reason, but the only reason it's there is because it helps support that self in the ways that the other two direct, but also can't exist without that pillar being there.
I love that. And what comes to my mind when you think about the habits is, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase chop wood, carry water. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
Oh, no, but I feel
I
like I
love
need you to
it.
explain it to me.
Yeah. But it's something that I think about,
Yeah.
like chop wood, carry water. It takes us back to
Yeah.
like the primitive days where
Mm-hmm.
taking care of ourselves was chopping wood and carrying water. And I feel
Yeah.
like, I mean, those were required actions in order for us to be sustainable, right? In order for us, we
Got
just
it.
couldn't sit inside the cottages and say, I'm an amazing person and feel fulfilled. It is those
Yeah.
small, tiny little habits that actually are the things that are going to take care of us and make us safe and take care, take care of our bodies and our spiritual side and everything. So I love what you're saying is like making sure those habits, taking action is honestly so essential for us to be able to take care of ourselves in the long run. Because yes, it's internal work, but I mean, we can't just sit here and do nothing and just think, positive thoughts all the time. It does
No.
still require the action. So
Yeah.
I love
Action
that.
matters.
Yes.
And the reason why I didn't set out to be a habit person was because I thought it only looked a certain way.
Right.
I was
Yes.
afraid because I was like, I can't do like the way I've learned about habits my entire life when I was taking notes while watching Oprah at 4 p.m.
Mm,
every day. I
yeah.
can't do that kind of way of working on my habits. I don't have that kind of consistency in my life.
Yes.
I don't have that.
Yeah.
But I that's another thing I learned a new way in that has changed everything, and it's much more doable than people think.
I love that. And when I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about before of like your stage of life. Like if we're not
Mhm.
taking into consideration, your habits that are going to align with the stage of life, then we're comparing ourselves to everybody else and saying, well, I should be doing it
Yeah.
this way. And so I love what you're saying is it's really, you do have to have that foundation of knowing who you are and the fulfillment. And then the habits just are natural, but they are the requirement in order for us to get someplace different. I am
Yeah.
curious if you could, I don't know if, I mean, maybe this is too long of a conversation here for our time, but I know for myself, whenever I think about this, identity is a huge thing that I love to talk about as well. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of, well, here, get to know yourself and love yourself and know your values. And that little question of how, like we know,
Yes.
but the how is so elusive to us. So how would you navigate? I don't know if that is a short, if there's a way you can be short with that or not, but how would you help someone with that how part of getting to know themselves?
That is something that was asked so often. I made a course for it.
Mm,
And the course was a 6-week course, and it wasn't enough time that I haven't been
yeah,
selling it for a couple of years because I'm like, we need months
or
and months
yes,
and months of.
yes.
So, like, if you want help with this, I would say get a coach like Chantel, like, sign up for someone, like, get support. But if you don't have the time or the money for that, I totally understand. What I would say is start simple.
Mm,
And I would recommend a do something list, actually. This is what began everything for me back when I was trying to figure out, is there another way to grow and change and to develop outside of perfectionism? Can I be mediocre and be okay? I created something that we now call the do something list in our community.
mm,
And it is what led to my podcast by trickle down effect. Like, it was not part of the plan at all. Um, but what it was a list of ways I wanted to uncover and discover who I am. It was only about exploring me.
mm,
It was bringing back the parts of myself that I had long neglected, like the love of nature, the love of art, even things as simple as baking, uh, listening to music I liked, reading again. And it was also about exploring parts of myself that I had long put on the back burner because I didn't think I would be good at them, or I didn't have the time for that, or that it was selfish to do. And mostly these were things that I could see other people were doing. And anytime I had that thought, like, I wish I could do that, that was something I needed to explore a
mm,
little bit more. For me, that included interior design and writing on a blog. And so I had a list of those things, and they were 30 things before I was supposed to turn 30 years old. I have done a list for, I think this is my 8th year doing it because I skipped one of the year in between one of the years. And I've yet to ever complete a list.
mm.
The list is not about completion. It's not about goals. It's not about resolutions. It's purely about exploration.
Love
And
that.
it's a living document. It's allowed to change. I make one each year, and I tweak it throughout the year. I cross things off, or I take off certain numbers of things I want to do there. But it's every year it's helped me uncover and discover parts of myself that have helped me feel like myself, but also know myself better. Because what's great about it is there are things on there that you try and you're like, that was awesome.
Mhm.
Not for me. Like,
Yeah,
now I know. Now I
yeah.
know I'm not going to get into that thing anymore. Or maybe that was just part of me in the past, or that thing that I thought I always want to run marathons and I ran one, or I did a half marathon and not for me. So that's what I would encourage them to do is remove a little bit of the pressure, because identity can be such a loaded thing, and it does require a lot of time to develop. But where you can start and where you can, like, what can sustain you through years of this work is just that exploration piece. So create a do something list.
I love that so much. And actually, that makes me a little, it kind of reminds me like a bucket list almost of like the things
Yes.
that you want to try and do for the year of, like you said,
Yeah.
exploration.
Less
So,
like go visit the Eiffel Tower. I remember like kissing on the Eiffel Tower. Like that was a bucket list, right? When we're like young adults, or go
yeah,
see all the big museums in New York City, or ride every roller coaster in Las Vegas. Those are fun,
yeah,
but we're just this is a little bit more doable, and it's also a bit more practical and related to your
I love
actual
that.
life.
Yeah. When I think about, I mean, I'm sure you probably can relate to this too. I know your kids are still a little bit young, but I remember when all my kids went to school, there was like, they always talk about that, the identity crisis of like, who
Of
am I
course.
now that I'm not a mom? And so I love what you're talking about because to me, it's like dating yourself or getting to know yourself in this
Uh-huh.
way where it's so intimate. Because I mean, we put it out there to everybody else. We're so good at taking care of everybody else, but we fail so many times to get to know the one person that we're going to be with forever, and that's
Yeah.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I love
And
this. And I,
everything else, like all your other relationships get a whole lot better when
yes,
there's a real self on the other side, like you.
yes, yes. Well, I think of it too as like you being intimate with yourself, you're the gatekeeper. So if
Mm,
you like you, then of course, then your relationships are going to be so much better off because you're not needing them to, give you something that you can't give to yourself. So I think that's so beautiful what you're
yes.
talking about. And that fulfillment piece and that habit piece is, I think it's crucial. So that's so
I'm really
amazing.
glad. This is
Yes.
actually my first time I've taught the whole model in one
Oh,
place,
really?
my whole
Okay.
progress model. So thanks for giving me the opportunity and helping me see like I can talk about this without maybe doing 5 hours of
Right?
of fire hosing. So that's great.
Oh, and I think it's so good. It's another thing to practice, right? Sometimes we do feel like we have to
Yes.
do all of that. So, listeners, if you guys are hearing this and you think Monica's progress model is something that you want to try and that just completely you feel like you've broken through maybe some barriers, reach out to Monica. Let her know what you are going to take
Well,
and what you're
thank
going to
you.
implement. How can they find you, Monica? Where can they reach out to you?
Oh, I'd love to hear from them. They can actually find me on Instagram at About Progress and just send me a message there. I would love to connect with them. And they can also listen to my podcast called About Progress. And that's where most of my work is online. And it's actually where I teach everything, but in more bite sized ways. So if they want that big picture in mind without having the money or time to invest in coaching with anybody, then that's a great place for them to learn. I also want to add, I do have a training for the do something list. I forgot to
Mhm.
say that.
Yes.
It's just a free training. I give you a workshop. There's a guide that you move through. There's also tons of examples from real women in our community and their DSLs. So you can find that at aboutprogress.com/DSL. And again, that stands for do something list. Remember, not all, not nothing, do something.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to go definitely sign up for this as well. So thank you,
Hey,
Monica, for sharing your insights and being a part of the podcast this week. Seriously, it's going to be life changing for a lot of the people that listen. So thank you so
oh,
much.
that means a lot to me. Thank you.